Hey, so I just want to make this video to sort of give a tutorial on how to key out a plant that you might not know. I'll probably do a series of these, but I had a plant in my yard and I wasn't sure which species it was, so I thought I would take it through a key real quick. This is the plant that I want to key out today. Right there. I'm not sure which species it is, so we're going to take it through the key. Actually, secretly, I do know which species it is, but we're going to pretend I don't. So key features are that we need to know before we take it in there are how are these flower heads arranged on the plant? Are they dense on top or are they a little bit more elongated? And are the lateral stems longer than the main stem? So let's sort of see the main stem there. And call that lateral stem. Don't see any of the lateral stems that are longer than that main central stem. Okay, let's take it inside and figure out what it is. Okay, so I am going to give this a shot here. Going to try and ID the flower we found. And I happen to already know that this is in the genus Madia, which is in the family Asteraceae. So I'm going to start with that key. Starting with the first key break here. Palea readily falling, ray fruit beaked, beak adaxially offset and curved, ray 16-19 millimeters, and anthers yellow to more or less brown. Well, I can already tell this is a super annoying key break, but we're going to give it a shot. First, the main reason it's annoying is that we don't have fruits. We just have this flower. It has not gone to fruit yet. So, but we do have some things about the flowers that we can look into, like the length of the ray flower and the color of the anthers. So if the anthers are yellow to more or less brown, we're going with this first one. If they're dark purple or yellow to more or less brown, which kind of contradicts the first one a little bit, but we're going to look at those anyway. We'll also measure the length of the ray, which is referring to the petal on the ray flower. So if it's 6 to 19 millimeters, it's the first one. If it's 0.7 to 20 millimeters or no ray flowers, well, there's a lot of overlap between 0.7 to 20 millimeters and 6 to 19 millimeters. So this is why this is a tough first key break. We can also, I suppose, look at the fruits of the ray flowers. We could probably get in there and find an immature fruit. So maybe I'll do that first and see if it's beaked. So try and get in here and take apart the ray flower. Just learning how to do this with the camera. And it is more difficult than I expected. I'll take this apart, see if we can find a fruit in there. It's going to be immature. This is the ray flower. It's got a ligule, which is the yellow petal part. It's got the flower parts hidden inside that. Right there. Looks like our stigma and style. The female parts kind of broke off. Before that broke off, it was heading down to this immature fruit that is hidden right inside that bract. It's that pink part right there. that will turn into what looks essentially like a sunflower seed lately. Oh, lately? Eventually is what I meant. So that's our immature ray fruit. And I'm going to go ahead and say that that is not beaked. Just looking at the key here again. The other thing we could look at is anther color. Let's see if we can find any anthers in here. Some anthers in the disc flowers I can already see. So the first flower we took apart was a ray flower, which are the flowers that are a little showier that circle around the outside of the flower head. These happen to be disc flowers hidden on the inside of the flower head. And the brownish things that you see in there are the anthers, the male part of the flower. Let's see if I can get the focus on that. These right there, those are stigmas. Those are the female parts, part of the pistil. The brown parts are the anthers, part of the stamens, which are the male parts of the flower. And I would call those pretty decidedly brown, not yellow anyway. But let's take a look. That's the fruit, the immature fruit on the disc flower. And I need some sharper forceps. Again, that brown part is the anthers, sort of circling around the style. Anyways, that's a pretty clear view of the anthers, kind of circling around the style. I would call those purple. Where does that leave us? I'm going to go number 2 here. We looked at the anthers, they're more or less dark purple, and we looked at the ray fruit and it was beakless. So that means it's not Madia radiata, which is good. We get to keep going. Heads, showy or not? So yeah, the flowers in this particular Madia are not particularly showy, the flower heads. But that's a little bit subjective. You have to kind of compare it to other ones. So we could look at a couple other things here in this key break, like disc flowers staminate, fruit 0, ovary wall remaining pale membranous. So basically they're saying that the disc flowers in this flower head are all male, so they don't produce any viable fruits. And we actually already looked at a disc flower. That was what I pulled apart last time when we were looking at the anther color. And the anthers were clustered around the style, which is a female part. And so they had both female and male parts. And there was a fruit attached to the base. So we know that the disc flowers are not staminate. They're bisexual. So we can move right past this key break. Head's not particularly showy. Disc flower is bisexual, does form a fruit. So let's go to key break 4. Heads generally tightly grouped, occasionally in flat-topped or panicle-like clusters. Involucre, narrowly ovoid or ellipsoid. Okay. So is the involucre narrowly ovoid or ellipsoid? Involucre is this whole thing. All the green. Basically surrounds the flower head. And I would not call that, be a little more clear here. So it's all this green right here that's for surrounding that flower head. And so we're looking at the shape of this, sort of the outline of that. Is that narrowly ovoid or ellipsoid? Or if we go down to 4' here, is it more or less spheric or ovoid or urn shape? I'm going to call this spheric or ovoid. This does not strike me as narrowly elliptic. And we already saw the entire plant, and the flower heads are not tightly grouped. They're more a panicle or spike-like cluster. So anyway, we're going to go with 4' here. So now we're looking at 5. Anthers yellow to more or less brown. Anthers more or less dark purple. Well, we decided that the anthers were more or less dark purple already. Let's look at a little bit of the rest of this. Stem 1 to 30 centimeters versus stem 6 to 100 centimeters. Filary glands. So this is something we've got in front of us right now. Filary glands. So again, it's kind of confusing because this whole thing is called the involucre, but individual parts of that are called filaries. And so you can see that parts of this involucre subtend each flower, and it's green. The yellow is an individual flower, and the green is a filary. And we are asking the question, are those filary glands more or less yellow? Or are filary glands black, purple, or yellow? They look sort of purple. I'm sort of seeing all different colors in there. I'm seeing a little bit of yellow. So we're looking at the tops of those hairs. They're topped with glands on top of the filary, and they look purple to me. And you kind of just look at it with your naked eye, they look sort of black, but they don't look yellow. Again, here's the whole thing. Lots of filaries with lots of filary glands, making everything I'm doing very sticky. Those exude like a sticky substance that causes the seeds to stick on the passing animals. But I'd call them not strictly yellow. There's a lot of purple ones in there. And they look black when you hold it in your hand, so I'm going to go with 5' here. So now we're on 7. Ray fruit black or purple. Round in cross section. I think I already took out, well, I took out and smashed a ray fruit. Let's see if I can get another one. That is the immature ray fruit right there. And I'm mainly looking at how it looks in cross section. Is it round or is it flattened? And that is flattened. Even though it's immature, we can pretty safely say that that's flattened. It's compressed. In other words, it's compressed. Okay, so we'll go to 8. Stem glandular hairy throughout versus 8' is stem distally glandular hairy. So that means distally means closer to the top of the plant versus the bottom of the plant. So Is the entire stem glandular hairy, or is it only hairy toward the top? I happen to have the entire stem, or one of the stems from the plant, right here. This is the top of the plant. So this is the distal portion up toward the flower heads. Definitely glandular. Clearly glandular. I'll try, this is sort of the middle of the stem. Now it's a mix. So I'm seeing some glandular hairs on this part, like right there, but on this part I'm seeing hairs that are not glandular. So that's in the middle of the stem. So now I'll move down to the bottom, the base of the stem, and now I'm not seeing any glandular hairs. There's hairs, but they're not glandular. So, and I happen to know that I did not get this on the coast. So, it says often coastal versus mostly away from immediate coast. I am away from the immediate coast, and the stem is only distally glandular hairy. So I'm moving on to 9. Do the lateral branches exceed the main stem? So this means, are the lateral branches exceeding in length? Are the lateral branches longer than the main stem? And the other part of this is the ray flower 6 to 8 millimeters or 1.5 to 8 millimeters. So, which obviously overlap once again, but we can measure those. I happen to know from seeing it outside that the lateral branches were not longer than the main stem, but let's try and measure this anyway, just because it's good practice. Break off a ray flower here. Got the millimeters there. I'm going to call that roughly. Well, of course, it's going to be 6 to 8 or 1.5 to 8. Well, this looks like about 6 millimeters to me. So that one could go either way. But I'm being a little generous with where I start that. So I think that yeah, it's about 6 though. How annoying is that? Unless they only mean from where it's yellow. Or even farther down, like right there maybe? That's where it looks like the petal actually starts, the ligule. This part's called the ligule. Sort of the petal of the ray flower. If you're only measuring that, it's more like 4.5 or 5 millimeters, so let's go with that one. Like I said, I happen to know that the lateral branches were not longer than the main stem, and I can show that outside actually. But so lateral branches seldom exceeding main stem. This was a good one because it was the last one. Maybe do the whole key. So, Madia gracilis. There you go.